everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we are dyeing some yarn so that way I can knit a hat for my youngest son, Ryder. Ryder is now 7 years old, can you believe it? And his favorite color is still green. That is something that has not changed since he was born. But he has been wearing a hat that technically is his dad's hat. It's a little bit too big, and also the colors are a little bit grown up, and I wanted him to pick some colors so I could dye some yarn just for him to make a hat. When I was filming the Dyeing to Knit Lucas's hat vlog, I think I mentioned that maybe Ryder would be involved with this dyeing project because he does love playing ChemKnits with me and dyeing yarn with me, but the timing didn't really work out. And so I did have him pick some colors to play with, and so I'll go through that in a moment. But I've had this yarn pre-soaking for days. I dyed Lucas's yarn earlier this week, showed him it. He thinks the colors are amazing. That was great. I don't have footage of that yet. Maybe I'll get some. But now let me show you the colors Ryder's picked out. While getting the kids ready for school, I pulled Ryder aside to be like, okay, I need you to pick some colors. And I also asked him to pick Dharma colors because when I'm dyeing yarn with dry dye powder, I like using Dharma dyes a little bit more. And the real reason for that is that the jars are bigger, it's easier to fit my fingers in. So I asked him to stick with colors that had D at the front. But one of the colors that he was immediately drawn to were Jacquard's chartreuse and Kelly green. And so we're gonna see if we can get there and have that be a little bit of a goal as we are pulling our colors. Now, Lucas's colorway is a lot darker because he likes dark colors, but Ryder, I think, is more drawn to the brights. And so when he saw, that there's emerald green, he really got excited and really liked that. My downside with emerald green is that it spreads and sometimes can just be a little bit annoying to work with. It's a bleeder, so I don't know if I should go for the Kelly green instead. They're very, very similar hue-wise, and I wonder if the Kelly is a little bit brighter. Okay, on Dharma's website, the Kelly green, which is this one right here, is a bit brighter than emerald green. So maybe I should go with the Kelly, but we'll see. I'll show you the rest of the colors Ryder picked, and we'll stop this little digression. Because ultimately I want to do a similar dry dye powder technique and layering that and getting soft color transitions, but since we're going for brighter colors overall, I know that the yarn is going to feel a lot more variegated and a lot less subtle, probably, than what Lucas's did. All right, he also liked Dharma chartreuse, which I think is great. He liked sour apple, and those three colors are all greens, but are all very different from one another. And then for a little contrast, he's a little on the fence about bringing in some moss green. I think I'll see where things go and if I feel like that's needed, if we need that depth. But otherwise, the other color he picked was bright aqua. And so I'm thinking that with the Kelly green, the chartreuse, and the bright aqua, we should be, and some sour apple, we should be able to get something that is like in the bright green family. Moss is gonna be like deeper and dirtier and make things less bright overall. And since he was on the fence with the moss, maybe we'll leave it out. But I think I'm gonna pull it just in case, so that way we have it ready to go. But I do think that bringing in the bright aqua with some of these other greens will sort of turn, I think that we'll end up with like a bright color. And so at least that's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping for bright and happy. And yeah, I'm gonna pull these colors and we're gonna get started. I have been pre-soaking some of Knit Picks Twill. It's a heavy worsted Aran weight yarn. It is very bouncy, high twist. It's pre-soaked in this tap water for a couple of days. I still need to go and pull a yarn mop, and I'm thinking of using Stroll. So Twill is 100% superwash merino wool, and Stroll is 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon. And I'm thinking of pulling that because I think that there's more greens currently in my Etsy stock in DK weight than fingering weight. And so I think that's how I'm making that decision here today. But the yarn mop doesn't need to pre-soak very long. So let's go set up to dye this yarn. All right, I've got our 300 grams of the Superwash Merino Twist right here. And I literally just remembered that I don't want to put any acid with it to start the project because I want these colors to be able to spread. Now, I'm not going to add a lot of water, but I do want to add some, just so that way the powders that we add will start to get nice and wet. But this way, when we go to flip the yarn, I guess I've added maybe 4.5 cups of water total. When we go to flip the yarn, there might be a little bit of spread. There's some liquid here eventually, but we shouldn't be flinging powder accidentally or anything like that. Now the yarn mop I mentioned, I just briefly dunked it in water and added a little bit of vinegar onto it, squished it around. So this will be just off camera, and throughout the process I will wipe my glove fingertips on it, making sure they're dry before I go into the next powder color. But anyway, I'm now gonna go put on my deluxe rubber respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves, and we'll start dyeing our yarn. Let's get started. And I know that I'm going to add dye to one side, flip, add dye to the other, then have acid. But we can continue to add color if I feel like it is needed. And I think I am going to go for the Kelly green. I am less familiar with it than I am with emerald green. But I think it's a little brighter, and I think that's what Ryder wants. And so I'm just going to do bits of this a little bit all over to give us a beautiful green color. And I do feel some notes of like a bright blue coming in. Okay, next up is chartreuse, which is a lot more yellow, way more yellow. I think that the last time I used Kelly green, besides when I was doing the color swatching, was back when I was dip dyeing colors, doing powder on wet yarn. I did powder on Wool of the Andes and then I dip dyed it, and the color spread, I think, a lot. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. It's possible we won't end up with a lot of different color variation, but I'm hoping that we'll see subtle transitions. Okay, this is some sour apple. I'm going a little bit heavy with this one. And then we're going to come in with the bright aqua, which is very much more of a blue than a green, but it should brighten. Certainly the chartreuse, it should be a nice balance. And I'm glad he picked a bright blue like this versus a deeper blue, which would make things darker. So all of these colors together should give us, even if we start to get saturated, something pretty bright. At least I hope. You can see how bright this bright aqua is as I'm adding it a little bit all over. I have no idea about the balance or anything, but I think that moss, I'm going to hold on to that. I'm going to hold on, and we'll see where this color starts to look once we add the water and spread everything out. Now, in dyeing Lucas's yarn, I had one benefit already. And I'm just carefully moving this down. And the benefit there is that I had layered all those colors together already. So I knew a bit what I wanted. And that definitely gave me an advantage. But what I see happening here, just from flipping, is beautiful. And so I can already tell that we're on the right track. I just hope that it's going to be pigmented enough. However, if the final color on the yarn, if I end up wishing that there was a lot more color on it, that is something we can totally control and change. If I end up wishing for more color, we 120% can add more dye on at a later date. So we're definitely not limited. This initial green I see here is making me very, very happy because it means that those notes that I'm wanting to come through might be working. Okay, we're gonna do the sour apple next and layer this one on. The nice thing about, like, I could have just picked a yellow, a bright blue, and even a green to do this layering and these colors, but the nice thing about picking multiple greens that are close but not quite the same, it means that I'm more likely to get some of those subtle shifts, because when you blend a sour apple and a Kelly green, you get something a little bit more yellow, but it's going to be subtle. So I hope that that makes sense. And then of course the chartreuse is going to be a lot more yellow. And I'm coming in, trying to focus it on some more white spots that we have. Okay. Why not? I mean, the more I mix up the colors as I'm adding them onto the yarn to begin with, the more blended things might end up in the end, because I'll have more opportunities to blend and spread a little bit. Okay, but now we've got the bright aqua. I feel like I see a purple speckle in there. I wonder which of these colors has like a purple in it. Maybe the chartreuse. And so I'm keeping the bright aqua a little bit more subtle, being a little bit more random with its placement, even like speckling it around. I don't know. We'll see what we get. We will see what we get. Okay. Okay, I am excited and curious to see what's going to happen. But now I think I want to let things sit for a tiny bit before I add on the color. And this is for two reasons. One, this is going to give the colors a chance to soak in and get wet. And so it means that they'll still spread, but maybe not quite as far. And, well, actually, I guess that's the main reason. I don't know if there's a two. So I'm going to set a timer for 5 minutes, and then we'll come back. All right, let's do this. And what's funny is because originally I wanted to create something like Lucas's yarn for Ryder with like deep, saturated green colors. Oh, right now I'm putting on water that is was 8 cups of water with 1 tablespoon of white vinegar. So just a little bit of vinegar in there. But I think I need to remind myself that it's okay for me to do things for them that aren't matching. When they were little, I would dress the kids up in matching clothes all the time, you know, and that was something that we did a lot. And there's definitely a lot less of that now that they are older. Okay, so the Kelly green absolutely is overtaken this. But it is, I do feel like we still have some subtle shifts in here. There are definitely more yellow patches and some darker patches. I think looking at this, I think what I'm going to want to do, I'm debating for sure. So we definitely have some really great color depth in here. It's just, I don't know, feels very, very subtle. So I think what I want to do, even though things are cold, I'm going to bring in the bright aqua again. And I am sort of just speckling it on lightly. Not that this needs to be more blue or anything, but just to bring a little bit of some micro depth
into it. And I think you can barely see it. I definitely myself see it in places, but it is super, super subtle. Oh, I should have added more acid first. Oh well. But okay, I'm also now going to add, and it's like 1.5 tablespoons of vinegar. Let's add, okay. And I'll add one more. Okay. Shoot, because I definitely want to move things, feel like I want to move things around more, but I'm going to wait. Let's go and start heat setting this for a little bit. Well, it's certainly very, very green. And like, I do see some of the little speckles. I see some deeper patches. I guess I'm going to heat it for 10 minutes. And the heat's on high right now, but I'll turn it down once I start seeing some movement. But I'm going to want to, I think, yeah, because there's a lot of like, I think that's the Kelly green, mostly, that is all over, which is fine, but there's definitely pockets where there's a lot of dye, and then pockets where there is less dye, which, not that that's a bad thing, but see, part of me wants to pump up the volume of some of the yellow tones in here, which on camera, I'm not sure how well that's coming through. So, because I don't know if this is going to feel more bright or more pastel, you know? So what I'm going to do is wait those 10 minutes. We'll check in and see what these colors are doing, and then add more dye as we think is needed. I mean, there's certainly, like, there's deep patches where there's been a lot of green, like right here and right there. So there are deeper sections and lighter sections. But if I need to, we could bring in some moss green speckles, but I like that it is a very green color. So I think that we're headed in the right direction. I just am waiting to move it because I don't want things to become too uniform. I hope that makes sense.
All right, our colors, oh, let me turn on our light. The colors are definitely developing more. And okay, I'm seeing a lot of the bright green has like started to absorb. I'm definitely seeing brighter and deeper greens, more than I'm feeling more like yellows and blues. But it's just a very green colorway. I think that my preference, even though I love bright colors, we'll look at all that green coming out, tends to be more for, oh, I should get the tongs. This is a little hard. I think that my personal color preference tends to go more for rich jewel tones or like neons versus more Crayola type brights. But I'm seeing like a lot of promise in here. There's some things that feel lighter and darker, but there's also a little bit of depth of shade. Things are overall pretty bright, but I do think I want to add some bright aqua speckles onto this side as well. So I'm going to put my mask back on.
I was still wearing my safety glasses. And I am just very, very lightly sprinkling this dye down. It's going to be very subtle, and if the color spreads, it's not going to hurt what we already have going on very much. It's going to still feel related, but it's just going to add, I don't know, a tiny bit of some depth in some spots, and it's not even going to be all over. It's just going to be a little bit. And I mean, honestly, I can barely see where I'm adding this dye, and I'm debating if I need to add anything else. I mean, it feels really, really good. Okay, I think what I'm going to do is wait another 10 minutes, and then we'll check and we'll look at the inside and see if there's any places that feel like they could be too pastel.
I think greens are just challenging overall because they do this. They spread so much, and so it's harder. And actually, you know what? No, never mind. That's not true with purples. I was going to start to say, oh, it's a little harder to get the things to layer in a way when you're getting a secondary color versus like one of the more like primary kind of colors, but I don't think that's actually true. I think we are pretty good. I see some of those subtle little speckles in there. I'm debating. Oh, I'm debating adding more, but the colors do feel bright. It just feels, you know, a lot of whatever that is over there, but I don't want to lose some of the other notes. I think I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it. We are going to add some more water because if there's any dye on these zip ties, we want to dissolve that. And we're going to heat this for 20 minutes so we can finish setting it, and then we can get to our yarn mop. Now, I debated adding some color in here to try to like break up those sections, but there are subtle little shifts. It's just less saturated than some of the others, and that's fine. Ryder is gonna adore this yarn. I need to stop over worrying about it. I still see a little bit of some green dye in that back corner, but ooh, I'm still seeing a little bit of green dye everywhere. Ugh. Now I have to reconsider. Oh, you know what? It's not that bad. I'm going to remove the yarn and let it cool so we can wash it. And if we have a bleeding problem that I can't resolve, then we can reheat this in some new water. Sometimes greens can be challenging. Let's deal with our yarn mop now. And in the yarn mop, we see a lot more of all of those original hues, but we had vinegar in here. So I'm curious how much things are gonna spread out once we come to start heat setting it. And you can see those greens are spreading a ton. Let's compare this just mentally to the yarn mops that I've done in some other videos when, granted, we had some greens in here already, but the greens in here did spread more. And in other videos where something has sit at room temperature for 30 minutes, there would be minimal color spread. So that's just a little bit of a difference, but I'm gonna rinse out this container. It's not very much color, but why not? And we're gonna heat this for 30 minutes. The 30 minutes are up, and look what happened. I think that this color has spread out significantly from where we were before. The good news is that there's only a hint of green left here in our dye bath. But I think that this is a situation where, unlike some of the other ones, I'm both glad that I treated this the same by doing the immersion that I've done for a lot of Litho dye behinds lately. I'm also sad because I liked seeing all those patches of color that we had before. And so I think just when you have emerald green, which we didn't use today, or Kelly green, those colors spread so much that steam setting would be a better choice if you wanted them to like stay separate more and not overtake the whole yarn. But anyway, I'm gonna leave this to cool in the dye bath for a bit. And then depending on how washing the twill goes, we'll either wash this off camera or wash it with the rest of the yarn. Let's wash this yarn. And the more I look at it, the more it's perfect for Ryder. The greens do have some dimension to them. And so I think it's going to be a lot of fun to knit with. And fingers crossed, we won't have any color bleeding. It's possible there's some dye powder on the zip ties, so I'm going to want to pay attention to that. And I'm adding soap at this stage without emptying it first because if there's bleeding, I want to know. And there it is. There it is. Oh man. I mean, I shouldn't be too surprised because the water that we took this out of did have some greens left in it. But I'm gonna add a tiny bit more soap, fill this basin up with some water, and I'm gonna let the yarn soak for a little while, and then we'll come back and continue rinsing. All right, let's see how we're doing. I can already see the green in the water. But you know, just like there's some blues and pinks that are bleeders, same can be said for greens. So if this doesn't stop, we'll get a kettle and submerge everything and heat it for a while. But for now, I think what I'm going to do is add a little bit of just some white vinegar to this bath, and we're gonna let it soak for a minute. And I'm still expecting to see a tiny bit of color in the water, and this isn't going to be a permanent change. Whenever I add acid back into yarn, then I like to make it stop. But we're going to let this sit for a while just to, I don't know. I'm trying to be proactive. I mean, we don't even know that this is a really bad bleeder, but yeah. It's a slow filming day today anyway, so I have time to just leave this sitting in the sink for a while. It's funny. I mean, I see it in real person, but when I see the green on the monitor, I'm like, woo-wee! I think my kid will be happy. I don't think I'm gonna come away from this one wishing I had used less dye. And so for that, I'm really glad. But I'm gonna fill up the basin and we'll see how we're doing. All right. Let's see. Yeah. When the pH of our water goes up a little bit, then we're seeing some bleeding. But that's not bad, not where we were before. Let's do another rinse. Okay, let's see. Yeah, it's about the same. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, that's a hint of green. And so I'm not overly worried about it. But for good measure, I'm going to do one more. Otherwise, I would be okay stopping here. But let's do one more and see where we are. The reason for doing these extra checks is that by this point, that little bit of extra acid I had added is gone. So if the little bit of something is getting worse, which it's not, it's about the same, and it's a tiny hint of color, then I would be more concerned. But with anything hand dyed, if you're gonna not wash it by hand, if you're gonna machine wash it, I recommend washing it on its own or with other dark colors or something for the first couple of washes, just so that way there isn't any like bleeding that goes on to anything. But I have never ended up getting pink socks by accident from the wash. My washing machine has had other issues over the years, but not bleeding that is transferred. So anyway, I'm going to put this through my spin dryer, hang it up to dry, and I'm going to wash the yarn mop off camera. And here is the finished yarn that I dyed for Ryder. Greens spread out so much, but this colorway is so pretty. And well, I know Ryder already loves it because he saw it and he exclaimed and he got very excited about it. I think that part of me was hoping that I could achieve something similar to like the blue with the grays. But when it comes to green, I don't think there's like that good of a similar counterpart unless I was going to start adding brown. And Ryder really wanted a bright green, and I think we nailed it. I just sometimes like get an idea in my head, and I don't know. I think that if I was going to be designing a green colorway, I would have wanted to do something that is like a very deep saturated green mixed with like gray and black to get it really deep, which again isn't the vibe that Ryder wanted. And so I'm really happy with where this turned out. It's very subtle, but there is a lot of variation in here. We have more saturated sections, less saturated sections, some that are more yellow, and then I guess therefore some that are more blue as well. But the whole thing is very, very green, and I'm excited to pick a pattern for it. So I'm gonna go and cake this up. It's fun how the same skein of yarn, or well, these aren't the exact same skein, but the same colorway of yarn can look and feel a little bit different depending on if it's a flat lay, if it's twisted up, or then finally when we have it as a yarn cake. I really like caking yarn because if you have something, well, this happens to be a subtle one, but if you have a more variegated colorway, it can start to give you a little bit more of a sense of what the actual color that you see when you look at the yarn would be. Because if you have a variegated yarn, sometimes you can see all the colors in the skein, but one of them ends up feeling more dominant overall in the yarn, and so caking it can help see that. I'm filming these conclusions for both Lucas's yarn and Ryder's yarn on the same day. So I have not yet knit up Lucas's yarn. And in fact, here it is. And you can see how the character of the yarn feels really, really different because that blue is so saturated. It's not quite a navy, but it's approaching there. And I think in my head, I would have done the same thing with green, but I'm really glad I let Ryder pick out the color that he wanted on my green swatches, because this one feels like him. In our yarn mop, you can really feel more of the different tones in here, even though the green spread all over. There are clearly areas that are more blue, more just green, and then a little bit more yellow. The thing about this yarn mop is I think it's really, really pretty, but this is not what I wanted for Ryder's yarn. And I mean, it's a yarn mop, so it was the leftovers, but I was afraid when I was going for a bright green that I would not add enough pigment, and so we would end up with something that was bright, but not saturated. And I'm so glad that we ended up with something that is still a vibrant green, that is so, so green, but it isn't as, I don't know if you would call this one a pastel because some of that background green is so bright, but it is a lighter green, and that's not what I wanted. But anyway, it's time for me to go and start knitting with this yarn. If I'm going to use the same pattern as I did for Lucas, even though I don't even know what pattern I'm using there yet or what, but at least with the yarn caked up, maybe I'll get started on something this weekend. I started this video, goodness, I know I started knitting this hat in February 2023. It is now Thanksgiving 2023, and I finished the ribbing. The pattern called for a provincial cast on to double over the brim, but since I'm trying to do this with one ball, I am just doing 2.5 inches of ribbing. The problem I have is I like the ribbing better on the wrong side than the right side. Because on the right side, if I stretch it, the ribbing does like that. I should have done a twisted rib. On the wrong side, it just stays together a little better. So what I'm going to do is actually flip this and start going, I guess, the other direction for the next round. So here I am on the right side, and I would keep knitting, but instead I'm going to flip it over. And to prevent there from being a hole, so what I'm going to do is bring the yarn in front and then transfer the first stitch I'm supposed to knit onto this needle. I'm holding this one-handed like so, but then I'm going to put this yarn back behind and transfer that stitch back over. So you can see I now basically wrapped the yarn around that stitch. So now when I go back the opposite direction, we shouldn't really have a hole there. And if there is, I can just sew that up at the end. But this way I have the ribbing I like more on the outside, and that makes me happy. And now I think I just go ahead and knit one whole round for the first round of the chart of the pattern, but I can start doing the main body sections. In theory, I should have just done a twisted rib, but I don't know why I wasn't thinking about that, and I didn't really feel like doing a twisted rib, but I like the way a 1x1 twisted rib looks better than a 1x1 regular rib, but this works. The only thing that might be different is we might see a change in the way the yarn is pooling. It's doing a little bit of a spiral thing right now, and so I think that's going to reverse directions, but you know what? I'm okay with that. And since we're moving into a seed stitch section anyway, that's going to change the way that the pooling looks, I think. So we'll see. And again, without a tripod, I couldn't show you how I did it. But when I came back to that stitch I had wrapped around, I picked up the wrap and I did an SSK. So that way the wrap would be a little bit invisible and hidden behind this stitch. I might need to reinforce this area later, but you pretty much can't tell that I swapped it around. Even on the wrong side, it's pretty invisible. It is January 2024 and we're finally done. Who knows what I've said in other vlog clips, but I'm very, very excited for what I have created here and that we had so much yarn left over. I'm so thrilled. I mean, I still need to block it, but it has like extra space at the top. You can wear it pushed back a little further or get some more warmth and coverage, and it fits me, so therefore it should fit him for a while. As for the yarn that I dyed itself, I love the yarn in these textured sections. The way that there's pooling and a little bit of striping doesn't really bother me. I'll be honest, these sort of spiral stripe sections in the ribbing aren't my favorite type of pooling. I would rather have more micro stripes, but that is something that conceivably, if it actually bothered me a ton, I could try going up or down in needle size to change the gauge. And then that might affect where and how the pooling is happening, or add a couple stitches to the pattern. Those are things that can happen. So I wish it was a little bit more random, but Ryder loves it. And so just because like a type of pooling isn't necessarily my favorite doesn't make it bad. Often I might not block hats, but I feel like there's a few sections that would benefit from just like relaxing. And I think honestly, in terms of blocking, I'm not even going to pin it. I'm going to soak it and sort of try to lay it flat-ish and let it dry, and that's going to be it. Now, am I going to make a pom-pom with the rest? That I don't know. Okay, let's do our final check. All right, I think I used around 90% of the yarn. Somewhere I have written down how much yarn we had to start with, but we have 11.5 grams left. And now here we have the finished hat next to the yarn that I dyed. So I know this isn't the perfect like stockinette swatch or something to get a real feel of how the yarn works up, but this is an example of going from bare yarn all the way to finished object, even if there were some big gaps in between all of that. But anyway, I really hope that you've enjoyed this video, and let me know if you want more videos like it. But now I think that I need a special guest to help us sign off. I know you've already seen it.
Yes, I have.
But what do you think of your new hat?
I love it. I'm going to see how warm it is. This is so warm. And also I can do like...
Well, you know why it's that big?
So like I'll go in a long time.
Yeah, so it'll fit a really long time.
Great. I love it. I'm Ryder from ChemKnits. Please subscribe to my mom's video. And yeah. Goodbye. Thank you for watching.